All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Wherever in the world you may be, welcome to session 3 of Youth Advocacy Training for Ocean and Climate Action. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We are very, very excited for the upcoming session, and we really appreciate your flexibility and adaptability for last week's kind of interim pause in our regularly scheduled programming with our open community discussion. We really hope that you enjoyed everything that came out of that. Just as a reminder, if you have missed any sessions, definitely feel free to check out the recordings on the World Ocean Day YouTube channel. We have a little icebreaker here, so feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let me just make sure again that the chat is enabled for everyone. Yes, all right, it is. So go ahead, introduce yourselves in the chat and let us know what your favorite event is that you've been to for ocean climate action in your community, because we're talking about event planning and fundraising today. So we want to kind of get you thinking about what makes a good event, what experiences you have had that have made that event really positive for you, and what you think kind of works well in these spaces. So we're going to get started. We have Adam and Lanika today, and we're really excited to have them. There's the recordings reminder. As you guys know, we have our regular schedule today, so I'll just jump right into our introductions. First of all, we have Lanika Roden, the Caribbean Regional Coordinator for the High Seas Alliance. This is the second time we've had Lanika joining us for an advocacy training session. We're really excited to have her back. We spoke with her in our mini sessions this past July, all about the High Seas Treaty. And I'm really excited to have you back today, Lanika, as well. So welcome. And then we also have Adam Steckley, the co-founder and executive director of the Blue Scholars Initiative based in Miami. This is the first time we've had Adam on one of our programs, but we're really excited to have you guys here today as well. So I'm going to just move on to this slide here so we can sit for a second, but I will pass it off to Lanika if you want to kind of introduce yourself, and then Adam, you can go ahead after.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you. So, as Laura would have mentioned, I'm here from the High Seas Alliance. I have extensive experience planning events back in my university days, which is not too long ago. I would have basically served as a senior resident advisor, so I was responsible for hosting quite a lot of events on hall on the university campus, and fundraising was a big part of it. When I just got involved as a young climate activist, a lot of the projects that we wanted to execute, we had to try creative ways to raise the money. And so, I'm really happy to share my experience with you, and it will be a very interactive session. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lanika. After talking to you about High Seas Alliance and knowing how knowledgeable you are and the BBNJ stuff, I'm excited to talk to you about something else. It's going to be good. So I'll pass it off to Adam if you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Well, thank you so much, Laura, and great to be here. My name's Adam Steckley. I'm the co-founder and director, as Laura said, for Blue Scholars Initiative, and that's based in Miami, Florida. It is a program that is working to get underserved youth from our local community organizations as well as our public school system out onto our local waterway, which is called Biscayne Bay. And Biscayne Bay sits right off of downtown Miami and pretty much the entire eastern stretch of the county coastline in between the barrier islands of Miami Beach. And so it's a wonderful platform for us to be able to connect young students to the marine ecosystem. We have seagrass and mangroves and corals and just wonderful habitat and so much life to really inspire these young students to appreciate what we have here and hopefully want to protect it. And one of the things obviously we'll be talking about today is how we bring in the broader community, not only the students, but their families and many members of the South Florida community to engage with and hopefully help to become greater advocates for our ocean.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is kind of a good shift into the start of the conversation here, talking about bringing our community members in. I see a couple people who have responded in the chat. We have climate change organization from South Sudan. Somebody else's favorite event was a conference this week about phytoplankton. Koji has enjoyed releasing baby sea turtles. There have been some folks who have not attended other events, but they are open to the idea, which I love. Mangrove restoration, beach cleanups with some students, Elcoy in Brazil about ocean's role in maintaining climatic equilibrium. So yeah, as you can see, just from this chat alone, events can really have a broad spectrum of topics that we talk about. I have this here. It's all about cultivating a movement, right? We're in advocacy training right now. We started talking about the ocean climate connection with session 1. Then we moved to social media and communications. We talk a little bit about promoting event. We'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. But all of this is kind of leading up to events and campaign organizing for next week, what you can do yourselves to kind of create these instances of action and community with the people around you, whatever your community looks like, and just making sure you're able to really impact and enact that positive change. So I have community events can help shift narratives and bring attention to issues, amplify calls to action, foster a sense of kinship, can create lasting change, regardless of the type of event, regardless of if it's in person or online as well, especially in the post-COVID era, the kind of online world that we have. Obviously, all of you are attending an online event right now, so it's still very much a relevant thing. So to kind of move to the overarching theory of why community events are so important and what benefit that they can have, our first question for Adam and Lenika: how can event planning be used as a tool to drive action and long-term engagement? And then within that, how do you ensure that the purpose of the event or campaign resonates not only with the team that you're working with to put the event together, but also the community that it serves? So I will pass that off to either Lanika or Adam, whoever wants to jump in first.
Lanika, go right ahead if you'd like.
Okay, sure. So I'll start by saying that every event, events usually have a purpose, right? And whenever you're planning an event, you have to plan it with an objective in mind. Usually, events, especially when hosting an event in the climate sphere, it's always about building the capacity or raising awareness of your attendees. And in terms of connecting that wider purpose with who your target audience is, you have to have a good understanding of where they're at in terms of their level of awareness. Do they care about this issue? And that will probably give you some introspects as to what topics, what areas to cover in your event. For example, you can't be having an introduction to climate change to a group of climate scientists. I mean, they already have an understanding of what climate science is, what climate change is, the impact it has been having. Think about what would be relevant to them in terms of what their key priorities are, what gaps exist within the space. So I always tell people that, when you're planning an event, you have to do research before anything at all, right? You have to do your DEX research so you're not just hosting an event for hosting an event's sake. The moment you start treating event planning like that is the moment you lose the purpose and the moment you will not connect with your audience, with the team that you're working with to plan this event. And then once you build on from what you want to achieve, the major outcomes, how impactful this event will be, what will be the key takeaways, then you can start to identify your partners who you want to work with and these actions can lead to long-term engagement, because once you engage with other organizations in executing this event, once someone attends this event, they're going to leave with something, they're going to remember something. And usually at the end of an event, you have a call for action, and you try to engage with those partners even after, in terms of doing your follow-ups. I'll hand to Adam.
Absolutely. I think the one thing to really key in on there is making those connections. And, you know, that stems from the education program that we do, really getting the engagement aspect so that it's not, you know, an audience just sitting listening to someone speak. It's actually having hands-on interactive activities, engaging activities that, one, not only are you know, participating, but through the process of that participation, also learning. And so we've developed our education program along that same line, and that basically grew into, thanks to World Ocean Day and this annual global event, to a community event where we could bring our local community into play and offer activities where they're going to not only engage with the ocean or whatever ecosystem we're working around, but they're going to have the ability to create impact through their volunteer efforts at the event. And having multiple aspects of engagement, whether it be through volunteering, hands-on, getting into the dirt, in our case, you know, either removing invasives from the dune system or planting natives to restore that habitat, getting in the water for what we love as one of our activities is an ocean mile swim. And so it's, you know, revolves around health and wellness as well. Obviously, if we have healthy community, that's going to turn into a healthy environment. And so we want people to first respect themselves, and then that's going to absolutely allow our community to then respect the broader environment around them and ensure that it is protected. But again, it all comes back to making those connections, providing the information, the engagement to allow the audience to really connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for that really insightful answer. I think that Lanika, I really loved your point about, you know, you don't need to host an event on the 101 of climate change for a bunch of climate scientists. We definitely need to make sure we are reading the room, as they say, and making sure you're doing at least the base level of, I guess, market research is a good way to kind of refer to that, understanding your audience. But then also, Adam, I appreciate you pointing out World Ocean Day as kind of a catalyst for a lot of these kinds of events. World Ocean Day is the one day of the year that we have that is specific for this celebration, but a really big part of our organizational purpose is to kind of empower our audience to continue to take those kinds of actions throughout the year, our Ocean 365 strategy, you know. And so kind of leading into this next question here, that kind of takes a village, you know, it takes a lot of hands-on effort, and all of the things that both of you just mentioned do involve a lot of teamwork. So what role do those partnerships and collaborations play with community stakeholders, with, you know, local businesses, local organizations and nonprofits, local schools, all sorts of different folks who might potentially be involved in bringing the event together? How can they help with funding and promotion? But then you also both talked about building those relationships. So actually, as a young person moving in this space, where do you look for those kinds of connections, and how do you build those relationships?
Okay, so I would say that partnering with organizations that are more established, well established, they will give your event a platform, and you need that platform when you're planning your event, you're trying to execute your event, you want your event to be successful. And what that platform will do for you, even if it is that that organization is unable to provide you with some amount of financial assistance, it gives your event some level of credibility. So when you now approach a corporate entity for sponsorship, they're more likely to endorse your event versus if it was you alone, you don't have much experience, you know, you're the first time you're hosting an event, they don't really know your name or anything like that. But once it is that you have some listed partners that are somewhat known within your community, has some amount of influence, and you might be wondering, how am I going to get these big dogs to agree to partner with my event? It connects with the first question, your purpose, your objectives, your key outcomes. No, there are a lot of people that actually care about the environment. They actually care about the climate change movement. And they would be delighted to support, especially if you're just asking, I'd like for you to partner with me on raising awareness to help 20 youth or 50 youth in my community to learn more about why it is that we should um, conserve the ocean, for example, right? So once it is that you have a bigger purpose, people will buy into that. And once you have a few partners, whether it's your school, it literally can be a school. Like if you used to attend a particular high school, a particular primary school, those schools can be your partners as well. It doesn't matter the organization, right? You can reach out to your governments, you can reach out to your community shop, and they can be a part of your event. They can be listed as a stakeholder. They can help you with planning. They might even be able to provide you with advice in terms of who you can approach for funding and all of that. And in terms of strategies now, I'd probably just say that we usually start with writing letters of invitations, right? And I mean, when we get a little bit deeper into the fundraising strategies, we'll talk about the more creative ones. So I'll hand over to Adam.
So for us, building that vision of what we wanted our event to look like initially was key. And Blue Scholars hosting our events, we are a very small organization, and what was already mentioned was, how do you get the big dogs involved? Ones, you know, that have the audience, that have the following on their social media, the ones that can really help promote. That was really critical for us because we're an organization that is only 5 years old. And if you recall, you know, the better part of 2 of those years in the last 5 were during the pandemic. And so we had started and launched our program just before going into lockdown. And so nobody really knew about us, especially the funders. So we depended on the partners and the partnerships that we developed immensely. And as we've developed these and envisioned these community events, they have really only succeeded because of the partnerships and the collaborating organizations that we are involved with. We kind of build an outline to, you know, if you take the metaphor of a puzzle, and each of these different community organizations are the pieces to that puzzle. And without them, we couldn't do our annual, which we've done now for 4 years, our annual World Ocean Celebration. That obviously is in June during or around World Ocean Day. And I'm happy to say that this next year that we're already building towards in 2025 is expanding to a 9-day celebration. And that's huge for us. But again, we couldn't do it without these partnerships. So the vision of what you want to do to begin with is where you start, obviously. And then building in the collaborating organizations that are going to allow you to fulfill that vision and to see it through, and thinking also how they can help expand what you're doing as well. And from there, I think, as Lanika said, then you're tapping into the sponsors and the community businesses and organizations that are going to help fund this idea and see this vision through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate the perspective that you both gave on this question, because I think that even though like this idea of connecting with partners in different places can be really specific in terms of what your goal is, if you're doing more of a science and research academia based event, or a event specifically for younger kids like preschool, kindergarten age, the people that you're going to reach out to are probably going to be a little bit different. But really all that it comes down to is a form of community care. You both mentioned, our ability to thrive and survive and have these campaigns be maintained over the long term is really dependent on, members of the community coming together to support one another. And I think that is really central to this discussion just in general, the conversation that we had last week, and advocacy training as a whole. So now we've talked about kind of the overall ideas about event planning, but now we want to get kind of into the nitty gritty here. So like the actual tangible steps that it takes to put together an event. So where do you start? Like, what is step one? How do you move from a big idea and actually make it happen? What does that process look like?
Well, I'll start, or Lanika, you can go right ahead if you'd like.
No, you can go ahead, Adam. Yeah.
So back to that vision that I mentioned, it's a little self-serving, because part of what we created was based off of the different activities that we engage with or we enjoy engaging with and feel are impactful, and would be more impactful with an audience of community members. And so the first step, starting that plan, is getting that vision down on paper, pulling together the team that's going to allow you to fulfill that. And as examples, Laura had mentioned earlier that we've all, or I guess, sorry, you were reading the chat. Different ways that, or different programs that we've engaged in are beach cleanups or mangrove restoration. So these are really impactful, and certainly creating an event that has not only impact for the day of, but as was discussed, something that can be carried on. And in my community here in Miami and throughout South Florida, there are beach cleanups nearly every weekend that you can get involved in. So if we can provide an event space that really helps to bring folks that either are avid or regulars in beach cleanups, or maybe first timers. Often we're engaging with school groups who need volunteer service hours. And so we're reaching out to them. But, kind of back to the original question of taking this idea and turning it into something that's tangible. It kind of all started with envisioning something that would be enjoyable for yourself or for your close community. Because if that's something that you are already passionate about, you're going to be able to encourage others through that energy that you carry through in the creation of your event. And I think that's huge. Now, one of the things that there were elements of our vision initially that we probably didn't even recognize, but we didn't have until we brought in a partner organization that we work with. And because our focus is about connecting people to the environment, creating impact through volunteer service, what we didn't see is how different mediums can communicate your overall message. And we partner now, and have since our very first World Ocean Celebration, with an organization that works with artists to bring art to the public to communicate climate change and environmental messaging. And that was an element that then really it added so much value to our program that now without the art, our program just wouldn't be what it is today. And it allows you also, as we talk more about fundraising, to tap into other grant opportunities as well, to have a very wide expanse of disciplines that you're promoting and that you're engaging with in your event. So I'll stop there.
Okay, so how do you move from an abstract idea to a tangible, concrete plan? So I'll be very practical in my answer. You get a Word document, or you can use PowerPoint, or there's this amazing tool online called Canva, where you can create very pretty concept notes, right? And so, as Adam would have said, you have to write down your brilliant idea. It has to go on paper, and starting with your event concept notes. So you'll be writing about why you want to have this event. You'll be listing out 4 to 6 objectives that the event wishes to accomplish. Then you also want to, I mean, of course, you highlight the theme of your event. You're going to highlight, is this event going to be hybrid or fully virtual or in person? If it's in person, then you have to perhaps, if it's in person or hybrid, then there are budgetary considerations. I mean, even if it's virtual, if you're thinking about giving away let's say prizes throughout the event to keep people engaged depending on your audience. And then of course you want to identify who your target audience is. You also need to probably include strategies as to how you're going to reach these people, because so many times I've seen people try to host an event and they're very far from their target audience. They don't even have contact with them. For example, you want to have a session on the high seas treaty and the indigenous groups, and you've never worked with any indigenous groups. You don't have these people are not necessarily on social media, so you have to think about actual realistic and practical ways that can actually be used to reach a target audience, right? So saying that, oh, we're going to advertise on social media might not be enough. You might want to partner with your local news station. You might want to get a town crier if you're having a community event and there are older people involved. Older people are not on social media scrolling on Instagram looking for the next event to attend. But if you go on a radio station and talk about the event, they'll probably hear about it. So so putting your idea down on paper is the best way to turn that into a concrete plan. And as Adam said, formulating the team is critical too. And then you have to also identify that because events are so dynamic, you're not getting people with the same skill sets on your team, right? You need to look at getting people who can manage a budget, who is good with marketing, who is probably good at talking to people and engaging with people, who has the right kind of connections to kind of help you to get speakers, because it's time to get speakers for your events. It can get a little bit tedious because you need experts to talk on the topic. Sometimes experts are not available. Some people might cancel at the last minute. So you need somebody who can call someone who can fill in that gap on the day of the event, right? So you probably need somebody who is well connected. And there are different ways that you can reach these people, but I guess we'll answer that in the next question. So yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, Lanika, I really appreciate that. And honestly, I feel like you guys both kind of covered this next question in terms of how to recruit team members. You've both talked about, the very diverse uh set of skills that are needed to kind of bring an event together and how important it is to have that diverse set of perspectives as well, and network connections and areas of expertise and background information that people have. um I definitely appreciate, Lanika, you mentioning how difficult it can be to get speakers for an event. Considering that is part of putting this event together, I totally understand. And I definitely agree. It can be very, very difficult at times. But again, I feel like I am repeating myself a lot, but in order to recruit the correct kind of team members to your skills that will be complementary to one another, it's again all about leaning on your community and figuring out who do you know that knows somebody that you're going after, or you guys talked about it. I don't even have to repeat it because you covered it, and I appreciate that. But I will move on to the next set of questions unless you guys do have any additional things you want to talk about with recruiting team members.
Yeah, I'll just add that community, it can mean your online community as well. So for example, your if you have a LinkedIn profile, you can do specific searches for people and reach out to them to have them speak at your event, have them be a part of your planning team. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that as well. Adam, do you have anything to
Yeah,
add?
I'll just simply add that I think, as recruiting team members is critical, but as you begin to communicate your vision of the event and idea to members of your close community, your peers, classmates, whomever, I think that you're going to organically often recruit those team members, because this is something that will be of interest. As soon as a worthwhile event you're planning, it will be of interest to many other people. And so as you begin communicating your ideas, those team members are going to end up coming to you. Of course, yes, you're going to have to seek the key partners that are going to allow that vision to come to life, but the team that's going to actually work to produce that, I think you'll be surprised as you share your vision. Others will fall into place.
Yeah, very much so. The idea that your people will find you if you stick true to what you believe in, and you talk about what you care about definitely applies here. So moving on from the more tangible planning side of things, Lanika, you had already mentioned some stuff about budgeting and things. And again, leaning on community. You had mentioned at one point, if there are prizes or a raffle or something. Before I forget, I want to mention how critical I think it is to ask, for contributions from your community like that. They don't necessarily need to give you a monetary donation. They can volunteer with time of their staff members. They can volunteer with products. They can volunteer with promotion. So I just wanted to add that into this before we jump into this question, because the budgeting, that can be really, really overwhelming, especially for a young person who may not have that much experience in terms of, prioritizing spending, and especially when funding is limited, which it generally speaking is for both conservation events and youth events. So I guess the main thing is, like, what does it look like in a tangible sense to actually go after sources of funding, and then where, either in community, in general terms, or if you have specific resources as well, where can young people go to actually look for those kinds of opportunities?
I'll jump in since I started again. I think the first thing in my opinion, to do is look to within your community to organizations and corporations that align with the vision that you are working on. If it is related to ocean conservation, in my opinion, try and find corporations organizations, and as Laura said, even ones that maybe aren't going to provide a financial contribution, but have products that align with what it is you're working on. And I think starting there, obviously communicating within your own immediate family who may know of someone. So much of what we have created today that we started 4 years ago was through word of mouth. And so much of the success that we've had has been a result of people learning about what we've produced and coming to us. But again, that initial first year, first time go of it, you have to be the boots on the ground to find these resources. One of the experiences that I can share is we have here in South Florida a local branch of a bank that is called Ocean Bank. And it couldn't be more suitable for our initial event planning in 2021 for our first Ocean celebration. It just seemed to me that that was a perfect fit for our local community bank to support an organization doing good in the community and helping to raise awareness and ocean conservation, through this event. It took me 3 years. It wasn't until 2023 that they provided a very, very small fund support. But then last year, or I should say this past June in 2024, they then became our title sponsor. They just kind of wanted well, I shouldn't even say, the thing was for us over those 3 years was finding the right person within the organization to speak to. There were several attempts. It seemed that it was always the wrong person. So I just, from that, the takeaway is simply don't give up, keep trying, keep working to find their outlet or another angle to reach the higher administration within the organization, because it may seem that nobody will listen to you initially, but don't give up.
Oh, I absolutely love that, Adam. So I would say I'll probably use a similar approach. So I've had an experience with an event. So when I just left high school, I really wanted to help students to prepare for the regional exams, because in Jamaica we take the Caribbean examination council. That's the regional exam that we all take. And so I started hosting these national study sessions that would be completely free for students to attend. And the idea was to provide students with past papers and probably a little refreshment in terms of food and drink. And we all just go through past papers together as we prepare for the exams. I remember the first time that I was having this event, I sent out letters, and only one company responded, and they provided us with support in terms of getting the past papers printed. And so, in terms of, and then this is where the limited resources principle applies, where, you have to prioritize your spending when you're doing an event, because the most important thing for us is for the students to get the resources, right? So that's the first priority, getting those materials printed. Yeah, you want them to get food and you want them to have a great time, but we didn't get any funding support for food and drinks. So I remember asking my mom, which, leaning on your community, to make some juice. And, we got a big jug of juice, and we were just there with that drink. So I didn't get anything to eat with the juice, but I did put on the flyer, please walk with snacks, right? And then the second time when we hosted the event, sent out letters again. This time 3 companies responded, And one was a catering company, a Chinese catering company, and they provided sweet and sour chicken and all of that for the attendees. They surprised us with a whole shebang of food, and we got the venue sponsored, a much larger venue, and we also received the past papers printed again. This time it came in the papers, and everybody was so excited about this event. The third time when we hosted the event, it was we had to book the largest park in Jamaica to host the event. And partners started to reach out. So this is where I don't remember even sending out any letters requesting funding that year because of how successful the previous years were with the limited resources that we had, but we still made an impact in terms of the students coming out. They got their resource, they got their materials. And so that year, no request for funding, but everything was covered. Food, there were school buses, and school buses were able to get vouchers from some of the sponsors who came on board. And so really, I'll say to the young people online that you have to start somewhere. And maybe when you're starting out, you might not get to execute your full vision. But with the limited resources that you have, as long as you focus on the impact that you want to make, and you continue to host that event, because Adam, he kept on having his event every year, and then they became the title sponsor. As long as you remain consistent and committed, people will be pulled and drawn to you, and they'll just want to support and to see your initiative grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for those insights. And I think that the two anecdotes that you both shared are really exemplary of, again, leaning on community, but also just that persistency, that consistency, believing in your goal and the purpose of the event and the reason for what you're doing. Because we talked a little bit about in session 2, social media and communications, the idea of going viral, right? Sometimes when you're doing an online campaign, it would be really nice, and sometimes is actually the goal, to go viral. And I don't, one of the things about that we talked about is that that doesn't always necessarily have to be the goal. And, in terms of the first try of your event not necessarily living up to your greatest expectations or your greatest hopes and dreams, if your post on social media doesn't go viral, that doesn't mean it didn't impact people. That doesn't mean that it didn't touch the people that you were looking to engage with. You still have to celebrate and really, take a moment and pause and think about, what it means to actually truly engage on that one-on-one, more intimate level, regardless of if your event is, everything you wanted it to be and more. And then I also think that, I had mentioned the other ways that community members can donate to events. Lanika, you brought up that there were catering that was taken care of. There was a venue that was taken care of. You know, you won't ever know if those resources are available to you if you don't ask. So again, just being really consistent and sending out those emails and letters to your community members is extremely important. And a lot of the time they're just looking for proof of concept, which is why that first initial event might not be 100%. But again, once you have that proof of concept, that's where that persistency really comes in, because that's when you can really start to dig deeper on these things. So now we've kind of talked about the pre-planning. Now, when it comes to actually getting the event in motion, this is kind of something that is open-ended. I do want to make sure that we have time for the Q&A. We're at 45 minutes here. So if during this section, anybody has any questions, we'll probably just move from these questions right into the Q&A. So feel free to ask questions in the chat, in the Q&A. I've already seen a couple that we'll get to. But for Adam and Lanika, there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to planning an event. So how do you stay organized? How do you, how are you able to adapt if something goes wrong? Um, you know, we've talked a lot about leaning on your team, but what does that actually look like in a tangible sense on the day of the event? I'll pass it off to either of you.
Lanika, would you like to start?
Sure, I'll start by saying it looks like chaos. So, on the actual day of the event is when, you know, people who probably they've never planned an event before, they're seeing everything happen. And so there will be changes, the Murphy's Law sometimes become real when you're executing an event, especially when it's very important. Everything that can go wrong just starts falling apart. Um, how do you stay organized? So we use most times in terms of the events that even with High Seas Alliance, what we do is we have an Excel sheet, we have a checklist. Sometimes we have two for different purposes. And you might want to look at what you do before the event, things to do during the event, things to do after the event, and people are assigned to each task. Um, and I think that part is very critical. Not only do you assign one person for each task, but that person should have a second, depending on the expanse of your team, because then that um, it lowers the risk of that activity being forgotten, and in the event that somebody else is overburdened, there's always somebody to fill in the gap or provide support. um, I'd say that another way to stay organized is ensure that you do your briefings. Oh gosh, I will be the first to admit I don't like meetings, right? When they say, oh, we're going to have a meeting, try to get there 10 minutes before the event so we can just do a last debrief. Right? We've had so many meetings before. I'm like, okay. But it's so important that you do meet with your team to discuss um, all the items on that checklist to ensure that everybody is on the same page. And I think that's critical. Everybody has an understanding as to the different items on that spreadsheet, because you can write it out and people see it and read it and have a total different interpretation or meaning, and then on the day you see them doing something else and that's not the intention. So always try to be clear. In terms of, do I just go through all the questions? I'll be
Yeah,
quick.
go for it. For it.
Okay, so advice for handling unexpected challenges or last minute changes. Just be very innovative. I'd say that sometimes when things happen, it happens for a reason. So thank the universe. For example, if it is that you plan the event to a T, but then the speaker who is, the last segment, the speaker, they cancel, they're not coming, turn that last segment into an open discussion with the audience and make the event more engaging. Maybe that might turn out to be the highlight for your attendees, because that's the part of the event that they actually get to share their experiences, to learn from somebody else in the audience. And all of that. So always be creative, be open-minded, to pivot when you need to. Uh, Sometimes the venue, for example, well, I'll give this real example. So I got married last Monday, and I planned my reception on the beach, right? It so happened that there was a tropical storm that was coming. We had no idea when we set the date that a tropical storm would decide to come on the day. But the reception manager, she was able to, so we all still headed to the beach, but we moved it up into one of the gazebos and we had the reception there. And so sometimes things like that will happen where you plan to have the event at a certain place. You assumed perfect weather conditions. And things just don't exactly play out that way, but still go on, still don't freak out, because there can always be an alternative, which is why during the event planning process you are to have a contingency plan, right? A lot of times we forget to have that in place, but we really should always have a plan for in the event things don't go the way that they should. What are some creative ways to keep the momentum going after an event and sustain community engagement? So don't post all the event pictures at once. Try to post them probably two every other day, and share about what was happening in that picture. Do blog posts. Probably during the event you want to get a few clips of the audience giving live feedback. Oh, this event, it was so impactful. I learned so much about climate change. I didn't know that the reason why the place was getting so hot, or the reason why we're experiencing droughts, is because of the greenhouse gas effects and all of that. So have people share about their experiences, get that recorded, and you can post that post event. You can also send out thank you letters, do your thank you letters and all of that, and follow-ups, engagements. Definitely doing a post-event evaluation. So I'll hand over to Adam.
Thank you, Lanika, and congratulations on your wedding day. I was just in St. Croix. I'm assuming that was in Jamaica, where your wedding was. Is that right? Yeah, I was in St. Croix last weekend as well, so experiencing some of the similar unfortunate weather conditions. So to stay organized, we obviously, if you're planning your first event, it doesn't really happen until after, but leading up to that first event, sorry, what doesn't happen after is what I was gonna, what I will mention, but leading up to that first event, as Lanika said, lists of everything that you can imagine, even your worst case scenario, so that you can kind of go through everything, not only what, supplies you need, who's in charge of what, permitting is something big for us because we're hosting events on the beach during turtle nesting season. And so there are different state and county and city groups that we need to get clearance from for that. But again, having all of your paperwork and any documentation regarding permits or receipts that you've paid for services towards your event, make sure that you have all of that in a folder that you can refer to. But lists, I'm crazy about lists because I can't, it just takes all of the pressure of trying to remember everything. But what I was going to get to, once you complete your first event and any event following that, if you're doing this on a annual basis as we are, or maybe month, quarterly, we need to get together for a debrief immediately after or as close to the actual event, because we want to talk about, of course, all the good things that happen to inspire our group and to keep them, talking about this momentum going with our own group and team. But we really want to focus in on what are the things that matter, the tweaks that we make to create a better event, not only for ourselves, for our partners, for our sponsors, but for the audience that's participating. And so getting together immediately after or as close as possible, and talking about all of those things, and that's going to help you build, as for us, on how to create a better event the following time. As far as handling unexpected challenges, we do, as I mentioned, a good part of our program is outdoors. And so we have been fortunate, and it's in June, and in South Florida in June, we are actually in hurricane season by that point. So we can always have unexpected showers and lightning and thunderstorms, but it wasn't until this last June, our fourth go of this, that we actually had to delay the start of the event due to rain. Wasn't allowing us to get out and set everything that we needed. So, you just kind of roll with it as we did, and we just got a little bit later start. And maybe it deterred some people from getting out of bed and coming to the event, which was unfortunate, but you just cross your fingers and hope for the best. Keeping momentum going, I love the idea of sort of staggering your photos of the event. That thing that people really love, not seeing the event, but seeing themselves at the event through your photos. But other ways you might also momentum is, Lanika did mention, your blogs about the event, but if you are doing any kind of impact, sometimes the results of those impactful activities aren't obvious or accessible the day of. So if you're doing, say, a restoration of the dune or the mangroves, you can periodically update on the growth and success of those restorations. Um, and just updating everybody on other opportunities throughout the year that are maybe similar to what you introduced your audience to, and giving them opportunities beyond yours that maybe not something that you are leading, but ways that they can stay involved in that same activity, whether it be a beach cleanup or a restoration or anything. So
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys both for those answers to all of these questions. I think that we do have some questions here in the chat and in the Q&A. We have like 2 minutes until the top of the hour, so I apologize in advance that it's definitely going to go over time. But I do want to mention, let me see, where did it go? I saw one question in the chat that was really, really good. Where did it go? I'm losing my mind. It's fine. So I do see this question here in the chat, in the Q&A, actually. How do you feel when you're discouraged by something that happens or unmotivated? What is the process to keep your team going? There are a lot of bumps that can potentially happen. We did just talk a lot about handling those unexpected challenges, but in terms of like team morale, what is the best way to like keep everybody moving forward?
positivity, you can't have enough positivity, even in the unfortunate situations that you're going to encounter. Sometimes it may be where, and I'll use the example, as we build out our program for next year, one of the things that we are incorporating is a live music concert. And we have worked, most everybody on this call might be familiar with Jack Johnson, a wonderful advocate for our oceans, a wonderful musician. But that was our hope to get Jack Johnson to come play in Miami next June for our World Ocean Celebration. We attempted from different angles to connect with him, but this isn't maybe as direct to your question, but we weren't getting the connections that we needed. We ended up securing a musician. It wasn't Jack Johnson. It was Donovan Frankenreiter, who's a similar, surfer, ocean warrior, and wonderful musician. So we're excited about that. But the other thing is, what you don't accomplish in your first go round, if if you stick to it, and if not everything does go correctly, as the question was, don't just, think of it as, okay, this year it's not going to work out as we had hoped, but next year we will, get started on that sooner and hopefully be able to secure the musician, the speaker, whomever it may be.
Yeah, I'll just say you have to remain positive, and as we say in the Caribbean, try to keep it professional. So you don't want to, you have to realize your job as the team leader or the event lead is to keep up the momentum, keep everybody motivated. So if something happens that is a problem or going to be a problem, you will feel it inside, but your first response or reaction should be, how do I fix this? I need to fix this quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this will be our last question for the Q&A here. If we didn't get to your question, I share my email in the next slide. Feel free to email me and I will get back to you as soon as I can. But we have from Dakota here, what information do you think is most important to include or communicate when you're reaching out to organizations to collaborate or partner with? I think the key here is the question, how do you improve your chances of successful partnerships? We just talked about, how to stay positive if it doesn't happen. So now kind of going back to the front of this to bring us all full circle, how do you maximize your chances of success here?
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll go.
go
So
ahead.
so I'll take a stab at the two questions, actually the two last questions in the chat. So for the first one, in terms of what do you include everything that you can. So even your team members, I always have a page in my concept notes to highlight my team members, their experience. I put their picture on it, their pictures on it. For international events, it shows diversity. For local events, the emphasis is more on the experience level of your team, different organizations that they're from. um, but you want to include your general overview. In fact, I'll encourage you to even Google examples of event concept notes, right? We're not reinventing the wheel here. There are quite a lot of examples online that you can look at. And you'll see that they all start with an overview in terms of what the event is about, the theme, the venue, where it will be held, the type of event, the objectives, the target audience, key partners, the event planning team, probably a draft agenda so that they can see the type of people, the caliber of people that will be a part of your event, and that will serve as a pull factor. And that kind of ties into the other question that asks about how do you get through to people who are not necessarily in tune with the whole climate change movement, because I currently serve as an advisor on the Youth Month planning activities for the Ministry of Education in Jamaica. And one of the biggest things for us is reaching those detached youth. So those young people who their interests lie in everything else except anything academic, anything that we would perhaps deem to be productive, right? And it's really just, again, it goes back to what we discussed before. Think about what these people value. What do they value? What is their main aim in life? For some of them, they might actually be interested in careers in climate. What can they do? What are different activities that they can do? What is a creative way that they can participate in the space? And maybe you have to be creative in your execution of the event. So who is their favorite singer? So Adam was just talking about having a live band at his event. Who is their favorite singer? This is a local community, so you must be able to find something, or maybe the star football player in the community, reach out to him, ask him to be a part of the event. He can serve as a keynote speaker or as a panelist, right? If you don't want to give him a whole keynote spotlight, and maybe that will have some of the young people who are not necessarily in tune to the climate space, but you've piqued their interest by dabbling a little bit into their world and bringing it over. Right. So you have to think about the fact that people are looking for events that they can get something out of, whether that's for an academic audience, they're looking for information, they're looking for building their capacity, expanding their network, right? You have people who attend events just because of the kind of partners that you have listed and the speakers, and they're interested in meeting these people, they're interested in meeting somebody from that company. Others might attend an event for the entertainment.
So I think for us, what we're looking for, and just as Lanika said, is to try and create a space for our partners that they can come in and do what they do best. So giving them the platform and the recognition for engaging the community through your event in the way that they would normally do it, even at their if they were producing their own event. Obviously, we as a nonprofit organization are partnering mostly with other nonprofits. Funding is limited for us, as was discussed. And so if you can build into your budget some form of payment to the organizations that are partnering with you to make the event successful, that's always super valuable. But I think also beyond that, just allowing or providing all of the needs at your event that they would need, so that they really just have to show up to implement their service, making it as seamless as possible for them. Of course, we all want representation of our brand. So any marketing that is done, it's important to include all of your partners so that everybody gets recognition, even though at the top of that recognition is going to be, yourself, your team, your brand. But you make sure that you're acknowledging everybody that's making it a success.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both so much for that. I do see we have a couple of questions. We're not going to be able to get to them. We are super over time, and I do apologize, but it has been an absolutely wonderful session. I'm just going to shout out the World Ocean Day website. We do always, every year, prior to World Ocean Day and the months and weeks leading up to it, we put out an event planning toolkit, downloadable for free on the World Ocean Day website, and it's an excellent resource that covers a ton of what we've covered today in sometimes even greater detail when it comes down to the nitty-gritty stuff. So definitely go and check that out. A reminder that our final session has been pushed back. It was supposed to be this week. It is now next week, same time, November 23rd, for campaign organizing. And then again, all of the recordings on the World Ocean Day YouTube channel. We will be sending out our network survey very, very soon. And then again, if we did not get to your questions, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer any questions that we did not get to. But genuinely, thank you so much, Adam and Lanika, for this awesome discussion. I've said this, I think, every single session of this advocacy training cycle so far. I feel like this whole conversation could be its own webinar series. You both are so knowledgeable and just wonderful humans doing really important work. So we really, really appreciate you guys taking time out of your schedule to join us for this conversation today. We hope that our audience enjoyed this discussion, and I hope that we'll see you again next weekend. For the Youth Advisory Council members who are watching right now, don't forget we have our collaboration space in just a minute. But for everybody else, again, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next weekend.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Lanika. Bye, everyone.